Hey everyone, it's Adam Levitan and I am here at Fantasy Labs, and today we are going to be going over some trends, or how to use the trend tool and how I like to use the trend tool on Fantasy Labs. I'm going to be doing these videos once every couple weeks, and basically the idea is going to be to help you guys understand how to use all the tools that are on Fantasy Labs and also to make it actionable. So I'm going to try to go over not only how to use it, but kind of thread it in with things I'm thinking about as I'm playing and how I'm using all the data and trends and models and everything available on Fantasy Labs. So if you have anything you want me to do these videos on, any topics, feel free to shoot them over. So today I'm going to be talking about the trends tools. So we're here at the Fantasy Labs homepage. Thankfully, Peter's face is slightly cut off there. We go to NBA and we click trends. These are all the default trends that come up. These are ones that Bales and Peter have come up with and have proven that they have a positive expectation. So bargain rating, top 20%. On FanDuel has a sample size of 4,271 and produces 2.58 more points than expectation. Pretty significant. I think that bargain rating you can build NBA lineups with and be pretty successful if you know what you're doing just by using that. And we can talk more about that later. But for today, I want to create a fantasy trend tool. So you have to name your trend because it saves for you in the system. When you log in, you'll be able to go back and see all your old trends that you've created and see how they've been faring. Something that I think about a lot in NBA is rest and back-to-back and 1 day off and 2 day off and back-to-back road games. So, it's kind of a controversial topic, I would say, because a lot of people out there either don't think about it or don't think it matters. And then there's other people that think it means everything. They would never use a player in a back-to-back road game. So I've been using the trend tool to kind of explore how much validity there is to all those different thoughts. So I'm going to name this back-to-back road, where your sport is NBA, position is all, and we are testing on DraftKings data. So this is the default trends page. This data here has nothing to do with back-to-back. This is just the name. This is the standard how much data there is on Fantasy Labs. So since November of 2014, when data was started to be collected, there are 42,771 cases. These players had an average expected point of 20.44, and they scored an average actual point of 20.67 DraftKings points for a plus minus of 0.23. For those of you guys that are familiar with Fantasy Labs, you know plus minus is kind of the core stat. It doesn't mean how much a player scored. It means how much a player scored versus salary expectation. And that's obviously so important, because we don't care how much Chris Paul scored. If he scored 50 and he cost 13,000, his plus minus is terrible. He's actually, not a good play. If he cost 4,000 and he scored 60 fantasy points, and obviously he's a great play, and all that's factored into plus minus. All right, so let's get into building our trend. First thing I want to do is establish that it's a back-to-back. So I will go to time filters. I will go to days between games. And if you read over here, it says a value of 1 means that their last game was the day before, and they are therefore on the second of a back-to-back game. So I'm going to move this slider 1 to 1. Exactly 0 days between games for this sample size. So now we have a new set of data. There's 9,291 instances of players at any salary. See here, any salary, playing on a back-to-back. And it's about the same as it was before, as the default. So it doesn't really mean much. So I want to factor in that it's a road game, because the trend that I want to test, the theory that I want to test, is how do players fare in a road game when they're on a back-to-back. So I will go to team filters. I will go to home visitor, and I will say that the team is the visitor. So now we have a player's salary between 0 and 15,000 on DraftKings. He has exactly, this says 1 and 1 days off, but it really means, as we saw in the explanation, no days off, back to back. And the team is the visitor team, so we go down to 0.14. Fine. Excuse me. So one thing that I've thought about with these back-to-backs is a lot of the star players sit out, or at least older star players. Carmelo, Dwayne Wade, Tim Duncan over the last few years. So that can really skew data because let's say that those guys sat out and then a player with a salary of 3K gets to start and all of a sudden he's playing 30 minutes because he's Carmelo Anthony's sub, like the Derek Williams effect or the Langston Galloway effect or something like that. So I want to control this for higher salaried players. A lot of times when I'm thinking about this back-to-back thing, it's like, do I want to use DeMarcus Cousins in this back-to-back road spot? Do I want to use Steph Curry in this back-to-back road spot? And I'll show you how to look at that individually, but for now I'm going to look at it from a wider scope. So I'm going to adjust the salary for my sample. So under player filters, you can click salary. Right now it's 0 to 13,200 on DraftKings. I am going to make it say 9,000 to 13,200. Try that one more time. Salary 9,000 to 13,200. Okay, so now we've added another clause here. So our clauses here are, it's a back-to-back. The team is on the road. And now the player's salary is between 9,000 and 13,200. And now we have some real data. 241 instances of these high salaried players playing in a back-to-back road game, and they scored 0.32 less than expectation. And that sounds really small, but I think it's significant when we're talking about really high-priced players. We have to split hairs. So doesn't mean a guy can't have a really good game. It just means you're taking a little bit of value on the chin. It's not a plus EV spot for players. Now let's see how it compares to other time off. So let's remove this clause here. Time between game, 1 day off. That was their back-to-back clause. Now we go back down to time between games. If I can find it. Days between games. Now let's say 2. So that means there is 1 day off between games. Exactly 1 day off between games. So now we have a new trend. Oh, wow. And they have, when a player is on the road, he has 1 day off between the game and he costs at least 9,000. He has a positive expectation of 1.28 points on the plus minus. So we went from negative 0.32 to positive 1.28 just by adding a day off between games. Let's add another day off. Let's say that a player has had 2 days off. Still on the road, still costs at least 9,000. Our sample size getting smaller here. It's still okay, 106, but we only have an expectation of 0.52 plus 0.52. Okay, let's remove that. And let's go to 3 days off between games. In order to see that, we need 4 here. 4 and 4. All right, so this has a negative expectation, negative 0.11. However, the count is only 25, and that's something we really need to be aware of. Past results. This shows all 25 of the instances that it's happened since 2014, since the start of the 2014 season. It's just not enough for me to really read into anything, a count of 25, when it should be a more general. So we don't have enough data here. I'm going to kind of scratch that out. So basically what I learned here was that, yeah, it's true. Players certainly perform better when they have a day off. A back-to-back road game is a tough spot. It's not an overwhelmingly tough spot. There's not a huge negative expectation, but it's tough enough to at least consider. So let's say I'm thinking about DeMarcus Cousins. So let's remove all these trends. All these clauses here, we're removing them. Now let's say we want to see exactly how DeMarcus Cousins fares in back-to-back road games. So let's go to player name. We will find DeMarcus Cousins. We don't need a salary tab because we don't need a salary clause because we're only talking about DeMarcus Cousins. We just want to make sure that he's the visitor. And we want to make sure that his days between games is 1-1, which means a back-to-back 0. So DeMarcus Cousins scores 2.47 points less than expectation on his last 19 back-to-back road games. Pretty awesome, actually, to be able to see this, because before Fantasy Labs, I actually used to go through game logs and do all this by hand and figure it out by hand. Now, obviously it took me about 30 seconds to figure this out. Really awesome. But anyways, a count of 19 is not something I'm going to go nuts about. I'm not going to say I'm never using DeMarcus Cousins on a back-to-back road game. The count is only 19. That said, it is a little scary. I mean, let's change this to 1 day off between games. Days between games. 2-2 means 1 day off. And he scores 6.10 above expectation. I mean, that is just massive. It went from negative 2.47 to positive 6.10 when he's on the road and he's had exactly 1 day off. So that's kind of a powerful thing to look at when we're kind of making decisions about players. It's not just, hey, what is a player's projection? I always think about players as they're performing in a range of projections. And that range can be compromised by rest, as we've seen here. It can be compromised by extra days off. It can be compromised by matchup, pace, all kinds of other things that we have over here that you can test. Excuse me. So that was just a quick example, real simple example of how to use the Trends tool on Fantasy Labs. I think it's really, really powerful. I use the Trends almost as much as I use the models, basically just to test assumptions. And something I want to be clear about before I sign off here is that testing simple trends makes sense. You don't want to test like how do players wearing yellow perform on Wednesday when they're a favorite between 6 and 8 points. Like, that doesn't mean anything, and you're going to get a really small count anyways. But, make sure your assumptions or things that you're testing are really broad. Maybe you see somebody on Twitter saying that, Peyton Manning always plays well in home division games. Okay, maybe that's something we can test. I don't know how viable that is, but just off the top of my head, maybe that's something we can test and see if whatever somebody's spouting off on Twitter is true. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Feel free to send me any ideas for future videos like this. For Jerry, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.